April 1945. After nearly 6 years of war, the Red Army is massed along the Oder River in eastern Germany. Hitler's bunker and the Nazi capital lie just 60 kilometers away. Yet the Nazi Party and the Wehrmacht prepare to fight to the bitter end in what will be the final act of the Second World War in Europe, the battle for Berlin. As the war nears its conclusion, the last chapter on the Eastern Front will be among the bloodiest. The once victorious German army, which had stood at the gates of Moscow, now braces for the Soviet onslaught on its own capital. Red Army forces had reached the Oder back in January, but logistical problems and the need to clear their flanks delayed the offensive. Commanders initially planned to begin in May, but Stalin, fearing the rapidly advancing Western Allies might seize Berlin first, ordered the attack to start weeks earlier, despite Eisenhower's assurances that the Allies would not move on the city. The Soviet plan calls for 3 major fronts to converge on Berlin. Marshal Georgy Zhukov's First Belarusian Front will smash through the German lines on the Silo Heights and drive directly into the city. Marshal Ivan Konev's First Ukrainian Front will envelop Berlin from the south, without necessarily entering it. Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky's Second Belarusian Front will launch later to secure Zhukov's northern flank. To seize what propaganda calls the lair of the fascist beast, the Soviets assemble an immense force, 2.5 million men, including 150,000 Poles, 6,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, 40,000 artillery pieces, and 7,500 aircraft. The troops are seasoned but exhausted by months of constant combat and hasty preparations. Opposing them, General Gotthard Heinrich's Army Group Vistula and part of General Feldmarschall Ferdinand Schörner's Army Group Center face an almost impossible task. Their combined strength totals around 1 million men, 2,500 tanks and assault guns, 10,000 artillery pieces, and 2,000 aircraft. Some units, like Waffen-SS and Panzer divisions, remain capable, but many formations are understrength, poorly trained, or composed of Volkssturm militia, old men and teenage boys. Defensive preparations are disorganized. 3 defensive belts exist at Silo, but confusion reigns. The Germans' only hope is to delay the Soviets along the Oder. They lack the strength to counterattack once the front is breached. On the eve of battle, soldiers on both sides find different reasons to fight. Many Germans dread Soviet vengeance for Nazi atrocities in the East. We have to win this war. If they do to us even a fraction of what we've done in the occupied territories, there won't be a single German left. Alexander 20. Others continue out of loyalty to comrades, faith in Hitler's promised wonder weapons, or desperate hopes of an Anglo-American alliance against the Soviets. Fear of the brutal military police, the chain dogs, also keeps them in line. Red Army troops, too, are driven by varied motives. Some thirst for revenge for the devastation wrought in their homeland, echoed by official orders. There will be no pity. They have sown the wind, and now they are reaping the whirlwind. Beaver 207. Others advance under the watchful eyes of the NKVD, compelled by fear, while some fight out of communist conviction and loyalty to Stalin. Both armies remain bound by discipline and chain of command. No one can stop until their leaders decide the battle is over. On April 16, 1945, the Battle of Berlin begins with a thunderous Soviet artillery barrage along the Oder and Neisse. Thousands of guns roar as shells rain on German defenses. At Silo, Heinrich's men, having cleverly withdrawn just beyond the bombardment zone, move back into position once the barrage ceases. Soviet searchlights, meant to blind the defenders, instead silhouette their advancing troops, making them easy targets. Struggling through muddy slopes, the attackers face devastating fire. The offensive stalls within hours. Under political pressure to deliver a swift victory, Zhukov commits his tank armies prematurely, ordering them to advance through the stalled infantry. The result is chaos, traffic jams, confusion, and mounting losses. For 3 brutal days, the Soviets claw their way up the Silo Heights through fierce resistance. Sergeant Goglitz's T-34 is struck mid-climb. A tremendous impact rocked our tank. The shell grazed the turret but didn't penetrate. Loader Tkachenko was deafened. I spotted 2 Germans with Panzerfausts and crushed them beneath the treads. Hermann Klar, 136-137. Finally, on April 19th, Zhukov's troops break through and surge westward. To the south, Konev's offensive meets weaker opposition and succeeds more quickly, crossing the Neisse with less difficulty. German soldier Karl Pavlik recalls, "We had nowhere to hide. The air was filled with whistling and explosions. We suffered unimaginable losses. Survivors ran like madmen in the trenches and bunkers trying to escape. We were speechless with terror." Beaver 231. Stalin now allows Konev to turn north toward Berlin, prompting speculation that he deliberately set up a race between his 2 marshals for the honor of taking the city. Historians still debate Zhukov's performance. Some accuse him of needless sacrifice and poor tactics, while others argue the terrain, enemy defenses, and Stalin's pressure made heavy losses unavoidable. The Silo battle costs roughly 33,000 Soviet and 12,000 German lives. By April 20th, Hitler's birthday, both main Soviet fronts are driving hard for Berlin. Thick forests, swamps, and shattered infrastructure slow progress, while disorganized but determined German defenders, armed with Panzerfausts, fight fiercely. Zhukov and Konev push their men relentlessly forward, and by April 21st, Soviet troops reach the outskirts of the German capital. Soviet artillery begins bombarding Berlin's city center. As the front collapses, German command and control disintegrates. The Red Army seizes the Wehrmacht's headquarters bunker at Wunsdorf, cutting Berlin off from General Helmuth Weidling's LVI Corps for several days as it retreats from Silo. The chaos is so great that 2 different German commanders sentence Weidling to death, only for him to end up commanding Berlin's overall defense. On April 22nd, Hitler suffers a near breakdown in his bunker, raging at his generals and declaring the war lost. Yet soon after, he regains composure and clings to fantasies of massive counterattacks led by Generals Steiner, Wenck, and Busse. Meanwhile, top Nazi officials flee in the so-called Flight of the Pheasants. Himmler, Göring, Dönitz, and Speer all seize the chance to escape, and Himmler secretly tries to negotiate with the Western Allies through the World Jewish Congress and the Red Cross, efforts firmly rejected by Britain and the United States. German civilians, however, cannot escape. Frieda Schulze, a resident of Radeland, south of Berlin, recalls the confusion. "We quickly fled into the woods together, not knowing where to go. During the night, German infantry marched past us, heading west. We asked one of the Raidlanders if we should follow and got the reply, 'You must be tired of life.'" Laetitia Halbe. On April 24th, Soviet forces encircle parts of 2 German armies east of Berlin in what becomes known as the Halbe Pocket, called the Frankfurt-Guben Group by the Soviets. Between 80,000 and 200,000 troops from the 9th and 4th Panzer Armies are trapped with dwindling supplies and constant air attacks. Commanders Theodor Busse and Wenck defy Hitler's orders to relieve Berlin, instead trying to link up and save as many men as possible, leaving the civilians in Berlin and the pocket to their fate. German troops attempt breakouts toward the west, with their few remaining armored vehicles leading the charge. Thousands of civilians join the desperate columns, trampling the wounded in the chaos to escape. On April 28th, around 25,000 Germans break through overstretched Soviet lines south of Berlin and fight across 50 kilometers of enemy territory to reach Wenck's army. But most die in the attempt, making it one of the bloodiest episodes of the Berlin campaign. While the Halbe tragedy unfolds, the Red Army completes the encirclement of Berlin on April 25th and links up with American forces on the Elbe at Torgau. Both sides, meanwhile, continue committing mass atrocities. German SS, army, and military police officers execute thousands of their own men for cowardice. Soldiers plunder warehouses and murder Soviet and Italian POWs, along with forced laborers. Nazi officials also carry out final massacres of anti-Nazi prisoners. At Sachsenhausen and Ravensbrück concentration camps near Berlin, SS guards drive tens of thousands on death marches, planning to drown them in the Baltic Sea. Those who collapse are shot. Others die of exhaustion. The Soviets eventually liberate several hundred survivors. Carmela Fluck, a Ravensbrück survivor, recalls, 2 or 3 weeks after liberation, a Russian general came to our sick bay. He spoke beautifully and said he was glad to bring us freedom and would help us forget the horrors of fascism. We were moved to tears, and so was he. Fluck 151. Yet the Red Army, too, commits widespread war crimes, often tolerated or encouraged by superiors. Liberated Soviet POWs are sent back into combat without training, leading to heavy losses. Soviet troops plunder homes and shops, sending loot to their families or keeping valuables like wristwatches. Many civilians are killed, but the most horrific crime is mass rape, dismissed by Stalin as a trifle. Historians estimate Soviet troops raped between 100,000 and 130,000 women in Berlin, with some 10,000 suicides as a result. Beaver Neymark. Victims include not only Germans, but also Eastern European forced laborers, even Soviet citizens. Though a few offenders are punished, most go free. Commissar Vladimir Semenov's April 1945 report admits, despite the War Council's order to improve behavior toward Germans, many cases of rape of women persist. Seidler. The motives behind this violence range from revenge for German atrocities to peer pressure, to a breakdown in discipline and a twisted assertion of power. Much of this brutality occurs inside the besieged city itself. From April 25 onward, Berlin is completely surrounded. Despite Hitler's delusions of imminent relief from armies that no longer follow his commands, there is no hope. The city's defenses are chaotic, streets barricaded, hopes pinned on defending the railway ring around the center. Berlin is divided into defensive zones, with elite Waffen-SS units from Scandinavia, the Netherlands, and France stiffening the poorly armed Volkssturm, police, and ad hoc battalions. The Red Army's goal is the Central Z Zone, which includes key government buildings, Hitler's bunker, and the ruined Reichstag, now a Soviet propaganda symbol. The city lies in rubble from Allied bombing, creating both cover and obstacles. Massive flak towers are repurposed for ground defense, but General Weidling has barely 100,000 men and 60 tanks left. Around 2.7 million civilians remain as no evacuation is attempted. Despite overwhelming superiority, the Soviets face a brutal urban fight. Interpreter Elena Rzhevskaya writes, "It was a huge, unfamiliar city. The smoke of fires hid its outlines, and the ruins gave it a ghostly look. But 6 years ago, a criminal invasion began from here. Now the war has returned." Rzhevskaya 35. Urban combat demands special tactics like those used by General Vasily Chuikov at Stalingrad. Small teams of infantry, engineers, flamethrowers, and self-propelled guns advancing building by building. As the Soviets close in on the Z-Zone, every street, canal, and rail yard becomes a battleground. The fighting is savage and chaotic. German soldier Helmut Altner barely survives. Suddenly it became silent, even the enemy's infantry fire fell silent. We cautiously raised our heads above the trench's edge, only to duck back again. Right before us loomed a Russian tank, a dark beast pausing as if to inhale before devouring us whole. Then, suddenly, something unexpected. The hatch opened and a head emerged. "Don't shoot!" came a voice breaking the tense stillness. We froze. "Soldiers, it's useless. Do you wish to die in the final hours of a war you've already lost?" The hatch shut. The engine roared to life and the tank rumbled away. Altner 237, 238. Helmut Altner. But most encounters are far less merciful. For German civilians trapped amid the chaos, life becomes a nightmare. Many flee into the supposed safety of flak towers or the basements beneath massive structures like the Anhalter train station. Conditions inside are horrific. Countless never re-emerge. Officially, it was called a shelter. We called it a cave, an underworld, a catacomb of fear, a mass grave. Anonymous 5, anonymous female diarist. In areas under Soviet control, the Red Army restores food supplies and repairs utilities to provide water and stop the spread of disease. Konev and Zhukov's forces eventually meet, though not without tragic friendly fire. Konev's front is soon pulled back south. If there truly was a race to the Reichstag, Zhukov wins it. His troops storm the building in a savage, needless 3-day battle, suffering heavy losses to raise the red banner before May 1st, International Workers' Day. In the final hours, Hitler demands news of phantom counterattacks led by Steiner and Wenck, but none exist. In the bunker, he marries Eva Braun. Both then end their lives. The conspiracy that they escaped to Argentina is pure myth. Across the Reich, soldiers and civilians alike are stunned at the news of their Führer's marriage and suicide. Journalist Margaret Bovary writes bitterly, "I'm curious to know how it truly was. Few realize this man deliberately destroyed everything he could. Believing in victory, they believed he did too. He did not." Bovary 78, Margaret Bovary. Admiral Karl Dönitz becomes president from Flensburg in the north, while Joseph Goebbels assumes the role of chancellor. After failed talks with the Soviets on May 1st, Goebbels and his wife kill themselves and their children, as do thousands of others. Desperate groups of Germans now attempt breakouts with remaining SS units. Tank Commander Georg Diers recalls, "Our breakout headed toward Nauen-Oranienburg. We drove through towns, constantly under murderous Russian fire. The wounded had to be abandoned. Many begged for a grenade or bullet to the head. We handed out grenades while any remained to spare them. Ahead of me, an ambulance truck loaded with stretchers was hit. The wounded clung to the sides, screaming. It was horrific." Fay 333. Georg Diers. Diers survives, still an unrepentant Nazi. Traudl Junge, Hitler's secretary, also escapes, and later authors the memoir inspiring the film Downfall. Most others, including Martin Bormann, die in the ruins. Finally, on May 2, 1945, General Weidling surrenders Berlin and the shattered remnants of his army to the Red Army. The battle is over. The Soviet victory, though inevitable, comes at immense cost. In barely 2 weeks, the Red Army loses at least 80,000 men. German deaths may total 100,000 soldiers and between 20,000 and 100,000 civilians. With Hitler dead and the hammer and sickle flying above the Reich's heart, surrender is now certain. The war in Europe ends on May 8 at 9. Across Berlin, the Soviets erect towering memorials, both tributes to their dead and reminders to the Western Allies as the Cold War dawns. For the USSR, it marks the ultimate triumph of the Great Patriotic War, vengeance fulfilled. For Holocaust survivors, freed POWs, and forced laborers, it is liberation. For Germans, it is the beginning of a long, uneasy occupation that will last 45 years. The Battle of Berlin stands among the largest of World War II, yet even documentaries seldom do it justice. Even in this 20-plus minute film, I could only offer a glimpse of that monumental struggle. To truly understand it, watch our 412-hour, 18-part documentary 16 Days in Berlin. It covers the entire battle day by day with detailed maps, animations, expert interviews, and authentic combat footage, the most comprehensive depiction ever made. Due to YouTube's strict ad rules, we couldn't host it there. So where can you see 16 Days in Berlin in 4K? On Nebula, a streaming platform we built alongside other creators. Visit Nebula.tv Real-Time History to watch 16 Days in Berlin, Rhineland 45, Red Atoms, and much more, all for just $36 a year. Nebula also makes a great gift. Head to gift.nebula.tv Real-Time History to gift a subscription to family or friends, even if they already have one. Whether you watch yourself or gift it, you're directly supporting real-time history. As always, sources for this video are listed below. For more on the closing stages of the war, check out our videos on the Battle of the Rhine and the Battle of Japan. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real-Time History, the only history channel that could really go for some currywurst right about now.